Live from New York City, I'm Michelle Makori. And now that the Israeli elections are over, we are expecting a peace plan for Israel and the Palestinians from President Trump's White House. Let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv. Dan, the president and his mediators and his team continue to be very secretive about the plan and its contents and also the timing when we expect this to actually be released. So what do we know at this point?
Well, Michelle, along with me and so many others, we've been waiting for some peace plan from the White House for well over a year with no real explanation as to why it's taken so long. Of course, this is not an easy task, but President Trump said that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, would be working on it from pretty much the beginning of the administration more than 2 years ago. Now, the political environment has not definitely improved. The official Palestinian leadership, as you know, refuses to talk to the Trump administration. And when it comes to the Gulf Arabs, notably Saudi Arabia, there have been ups and downs in relations with Washington. And yet, Gulf Arab support seems to be one of the White House goals in all this. President Trump's been trying to maintain a degree of optimism. Earlier this month, referring to his negotiators.
Peace in the Middle East. If they can't do it, nobody can.
He seems to have high hopes for his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and a former Trump attorney, Jason Greenblatt. Together, they've traveled a lot to Israel and other Middle East countries to figure out what could be acceptable, but never revealing what's in the plan they're writing. The third architect of a peace plan is the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, a New York lawyer with a history of supporting West Bank Jewish settlements. An article he wrote in August 2016 said, "There has never been a two-state solution, only a two-state narrative, which needs to end because it is preventing the opportunity for real progress to improve the lives of Palestinian Arabs and Israelis." A self-described liberal Zionist who's been tracing Ambassador Friedman's influence on Trump policy, Lara Friedman, who's not related to him, says the idea seems to be economic prosperity, not an independent state for the Palestinians.
He absolutely believes that every inch of the West Bank, or as he would call it, Judea and Samaria, belongs to the Jews, belongs to Israel, and he has made it his mission before he became ambassador to making that happen.
You're saying that the Trump so-called peace team favors, well, the same thing that Israeli settlers in the West Bank want, which is they can hold on to territory. And for the Palestinians, do they envision even an independent nation?
So if you take David Friedman at his word, he does not believe the Palestinians are a nation. He doesn't believe they need a nation. He doesn't believe necessarily they have any ties to the land. He doesn't believe they need to be there. And if you look at his comments from throughout, including the article that you referenced, he seems to believe deep in his heart that the Palestinians, unlike many peoples other places who have a desire for self-determination, that the Palestinians simply can be defeated enough that they give up and they can be bought off by making their middle class happier, and they'll move on and everything will be fine.
And Ambassador Friedman's major selling point to the new government that Benjamin Netanyahu is forming in Israel would be that Israelis have never had a better friend in the White House.
Can we run the risk that one day the government of Israel will lament, why didn't we make more progress when U.S. foreign policy was in the hands of President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, Ambassador Bolton, Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, and even David Friedman? How can we do that?
Certainly there are voices and experts on the Middle East here, mostly political conservatives, who say there's nothing wrong with the Trump administration making it clear that it does take Israel's side, and that if the Palestinian Arabs and their leaders don't move quickly toward negotiating peace, they might lose all of their goals. As for when a peace plan may come out from the White House, officials still say they aren't going to tell us, but one good guess from many officials is the middle of June. Michelle?
All right, Dan, thanks so much. Dan Raviv. Let's discuss this further with my panel, Matthew RJ Brodsky, a senior fellow with the Security Studies Group, and Shai Franklin, a Middle East analyst and a partner with Gotham Government Relations. Matt, let's start with you. This peace plan from the administration reportedly is going to include considerable economic incentives for Palestinians, but will likely stop short of full statehood. So the pitch is autonomy, better lives over sovereignty, but no official state. What do you think that may entail?
Well, first of all, I would like to see what the peace plan in fact is.
Sure, we're all speculating
because I know that
now.
there are. Right. Okay. So if autonomy, then that certainly punctures a lot more mythology, because something that the administration has stressed for a long time when it comes to their peace plan that they've been working on is that it will be fair, realistic, and implementable. But of course, that depends on where one sits as to what is considered fair. So from a Palestinian perspective, if they're still saying that they would like a state, that's one thing. But of course, if it is under the exact same type of, say, completely corrupt Palestinian Authority, that doesn't actually improve their lives. So I think what's new about this approach is that it's actually looking at the Palestinian population and trying to make life better for them, which is in fact not just about having a declaration of independence as much as it is about having a life where they can move around, work, and provide for their families for a better future and not be governed by corrupt officials, as Palestinian polling itself continues to show.
Shai, from a Palestinian perspective, is this plan dead on arrival?
Yeah, look, I think Jared Kushner, somebody else, was talking about how they're going to address all the core issues. One of the core issues is Jerusalem. So President Trump, over a year ago, he actually said, I took Jerusalem off the table. He's a negotiator. He makes deals. If you take it off the table, that means it's not part of the deal. And it's not just the Palestinians. It's the whole Islamic world.
Shai, is any proposal dead on arrival when it comes to the Palestinians? I mean, many of them just do not want to see the existence of the state of Israel. So is there any peace plan that they would agree to? Because history has shown us otherwise.
Well, look, I mean, many or most Israelis don't want to see a Palestinian state.
But from a Palestinian perspective, you get the sense that some Israelis are willing to make sacrifices, some are willing to make concessions, as painful as they may be. But from 1948, there's been a rejection of any kind of
That's not true. In 1988, the Palestine National Council accepted the idea of a two-state solution. In 1993, obviously, Oslo. But any proposal that just comes out of nowhere as some surprise, here's the proposal, now we're going to negotiate whether you accept it or not, it's obviously dead on arrival, because that's not a process. They've been consulting different groups in the region. They have not been consulting the Palestinians for over a year now.
And Matt, is that a good strategy? Because, look, as I said, many would argue that there's nothing that the Palestinians would accept anyway. So get consensus from those Arab neighbors of Israel, get them to agree to this, and sort of enforce this on the Palestinians.
I think that's part of what they would like. They're very cognizant of what has happened before in previous peace attempts, and so they've learned a lot from that, but also they're clear in making the point that what they're doing is something different and trying to avoid past mistakes. So from their perspective, they have not been sharing clearly as much as the Egyptians or the Jordanians would like to see as far as details are concerned, but they're also aware that if they were to share anything about that, this is something that would immediately be piled on and dumped upon by the wider public before the deal would ever see the light of day. So they're being very careful to guard that kind of a secret. Now, the Palestinians just have failed to negotiate and don't want to show up, and it's not even clear that Abbas is really strong enough in his authority in Fatah and the Palestinian Authority to actually negotiate at this point. But this will be interesting to see to what extent this is about then moving toward a plan B as opposed to just a peace process. But certainly getting Arab state buy-in, and from the Gulf countries specifically, remains a priority.
Shai, Matt, focusing on Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, where is Hamas in all of this? Because Hamas is still sworn to Israel's complete and total destruction and annihilation. Can there be any kind of deal? And I make this point over and over again, because I don't see how you can make any kind of deal that helps to secure Israel without having Hamas, which is vowed to destroy Israel, on board.
So what you're suggesting is that you need to have something comprehensive that includes Gaza. And from the Palestinian side, you need to have something comprehensive that includes more than just, say, 40% of the West Bank. It needs to include statehood. This economic component, this economic focus of this plan that we haven't seen yet, that's a great idea. Invest $10 or $15 billion in the Palestinian economy. over a period of years, that would be phenomenal. You don't need a peace plan to do that. And then you could be preparing the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank to have more self-sufficiency, more sustainability. And then you could actually talk about some autonomy. But right now, all they can see is statehood.
Well, maybe that's the plan. The plan is to improve these conditions, give the Palestinians something to want to live for, improve their lives, you know, give them video games and Big Macs, make them complacent.
They're not going to accept investment and assistance at the expense of giving up any hope of a future state. That won't happen. Just do the investment. It's good for Israel.
Matt, if the plan does have Arab support, which this is the premise as we understand it, can it still go ahead if it has no support from the Europeans and the rest of the international community?
I think elements of it certainly might be able to go forward. I think the economic plan, though, is certainly part of an enticement to better the lives of Palestinians. So I don't think the administration is going to feel very predisposed to pumping in a lot of money into a cash-strapped Palestinian Authority if they're going to simply remain corrupt and not be at the negotiating table. But again, the Palestinian Authority really, they have a new finance minister now, which is kind of like a throwback to the old Salam Fayyad days, someone who's more reasonable and transparent when it comes to looking at tracking where money is spent. So we'll have to see where that goes. Other than that, I suppose that the details will be on what territory would be turned over in the West Bank specifically to Palestinians, and whether Netanyahu would decide that he is going to annex some settlement blocks that were originally slated to be a part of Israel anyways in previous negotiations, how that would be played. Specifically, if the Palestinians turn down the proposal, would Netanyahu go ahead with that? I mean, these are all things we'll have to see.
Shai, the administration has stressed that it is just recognizing the reality on the ground, that it's better for everybody's sake if the Palestinians stop deluding themselves. Arguably, why not try a different approach? Nothing has worked so far, so why not try a completely different approach?
Well, one thing the administration did is it took almost all of the incentives for the Palestinians and took them off the table ahead of time.
But recognizing the reality on the ground, which is Jerusalem is Israel's capital.
But basically what President Trump said is that he said it's Jerusalem, not East Jerusalem.
Well, he didn't say the undivided. He didn't say undivided.
He did say Jerusalem.
But he didn't say undivided.
And he put the Jerusalem consulate, which was the liaison unit to the Palestinians, under the Israeli embassy, the American embassy.
But the point is, why not try a radically different approach?
The reality on the ground is that King Hussein of Jordan and King Salman of Saudi Arabia will never accept a deal that does not include an independent Palestinian state with some sovereignty in part of the old city of Jerusalem. They won't.
Matt, 30 seconds, your final thoughts on this.
I think what President Trump has done amazingly is to puncture a lot of Middle Eastern mythology. He did that with the Jerusalem embassy move. He did that with the Golan Heights. And I think he might be doing that with the peace plan as well. Whatever it is, you can understand that sacred cows that have been held in the Middle East that have really prevented any progress will be punctured, and this may very well allow progress, whether now or in the future. But I think that's very much a good thing.
All right. As we stressed, we are all just speculating because we have yet to see the actual details of this plan. But we will, I'm sure, continue these conversations. Good to have you, Shai Franklin and Matt Brodsky. Thank you so much for your time. All right. Still ahead, the effort to save one of the world's most iconic cathedrals. We'll get you the latest on the fire at